Hello, and welcome back to the channel. The story we're exploring tonight isn't just fiction, it's based on a terrifying viral thread that shocked users across Southeast Asia, rooted in what many claim are true events. Our focus is a high-rise apartment in the heart of Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, the home of a 34-year-old designer named Martin. He lived a quiet, isolated life, but that isolation was breached by a simple phone notification. This wasn't a text from a friend, it was a message that defied all logic, seemingly sent by something that wasn't human. What was it? And what did it want? We're digging into the full, chilling story right now. Stick with us. Story 1. Friend Link. The invitation. Martin listened to the building breathe, a mechanical wheeze that had long ago replaced silence. The high-rise was a product of the late 90s. A concrete pillar of fading optimism, and its plumbing was a geriatric symphony. Tonight, the aging pipes in the wall behind his sofa were performing a piece comprised of resonant clangs and a low, watery groan. It was 2:17 a.m. This was Martin's environment, not a home, but an allocated space. His apartment was his shell, his fortress, and his cell. He was a man defined by digital solitude. He sat in the dark, the only light a cold, white rectangle reflecting off his face. The glow from his monitor was stark, illuminating the particles of dust dancing in the static air. It hollowed out his cheekbones and made his eyes look like dark smudges. He worked freelance as a data analyst, a job that required no spoken words, only the steady, rhythmic clack, clack, clack of his keyboard. It suited him. He was not lonely. He told himself he was just separate. Outside, the city was a distant murmur. Inside, his world was the size of his desk. A stack of books on database management, a cold cup of coffee, a wilted succulent he'd forgotten to water, and, just visible in the periphery, the heavy navy blue curtains that were never, ever drawn. They hung still, but in the dim light, he sometimes imagined they were barely moving. The work was done, but the solitude remained, suddenly heavier. The clanging of the pipes subsided, leaving a silence that felt accusing. It was in these moments that the separation felt less like a choice and more like a symptom. He picked up his phone. He had downloaded Friend Link an hour ago. It was the new thing, the app that promised hyperlocal connectivity. The reviews were breathless, full of stories about people meeting their new best friend, their new partner, their new whatever. The app's marketing was built on one concept: proximity. Why look across the city when your perfect match might be one floor away? He'd stared at the logo, a simple, stylized compass needle, for 10 minutes before finally opening it. His profile was blank. Just his first name. He hadn't even added a photo. He just wanted to look. The app, however, wanted more. A permission screen blocked his view. It was bright white, aggressive in the darkness of his room. Friend Link would like to access your camera. Martin hesitated. For video calls, I guess. It was standard. He tapped allow. Friend Link would like to access your microphone. For voice messages, he rationalized it. Allow, then a third, unusual request. Friend Link would like to access your proximity index. This includes device distance, Bluetooth triangulation, and ambient environmental sensors to provide the most accurate local matching. This was it. This was the feature. It felt invasive. Ambient environmental sensors sounded like a euphemism for, well, he wasn't sure. It felt too close. But the alternative was the heavy, groaning silence of the apartment. The alternative was another 2:15 a.m. staring at a spreadsheet. He wanted a connection, even a small one. He tapped allow. The app's interface dissolved into a sleek, minimalist black. Almost instantly, a notification chimed, sharp and loud in the quiet room. A new message. He hadn't even swiped on anyone. The app must have an auto-match feature. A small circular icon appeared at the top of his screen. He tapped it. Her name was Anya. The profile was almost as empty as his. The photo was intentionally obscure, just a blurry silhouette against a bright, blown-out window. It looked like it had been taken at dawn. Below it, a single line of bio. I like quiet conversations. A typing indicator bubbled. Anya. Hello. Martin. Martin's fingers hovered over the screen. Martin. Hi. You're up late. Anya. So are you. Anya. 13th floor, right? The pipes are loud tonight. Martin's blood didn't just run cold. It stopped. He sat bolt upright, the glow of the monitor freezing on his stunned face. He looked around the dark apartment. The pipes had just gone quiet. How could she know that? He checked her profile again. No location. No 300 feet away. Just Anya. Martin. That's a specific guess. Anya. I like your curtains. He spun in his chair. The navy blue curtains were perfectly still. His heart hammered against his ribs. He immediately checked his laptop. The small, integrated webcam was a black dot. The indicator light was off. His phone's camera was facing his desk. Martin. How do you know my curtain colour? Anya. They're a good choice. That deep navy blue is calming. It goes well with the way you have your desk facing the west wall. You must not like being distracted by the window. He was going to be sick. This wasn't a guess. This wasn't a hack. This was observation. She was describing his room, his sanctuary, the way he had arranged his furniture. Martin. Who are you? Are you in this building? Anya. I'm close. He stood up, kicking his chair back. It scraped loudly on the hardwood floor. He was breathing too fast. Stay or run. He should delete the app. He should throw the phone against the wall. He should call the police. And tell them what? A girl on a dating app guessed my furniture. His eyes darted to the door, to the deadbolt. It was locked. Martin. I don't know who you are, but this isn't funny. Anya. I'm not laughing. Martin. Anya. I just want a quiet conversation. Like I said. Anya. We've talked before. You just don't remember. Martin. I would remember this. Anya. I just know things. Little things. Anya. Like that scar. The small pale one on your left collarbone. The one you got from falling off your bicycle when you were 12. Trying to jump that wooden ramp your friend built. Martin's hand flew to his shirt, his fingers pressing against the fabric, tracing the exact spot. He had never told anyone that story. Not in years. It wasn't on any social media. It was a memory locked in his own head. A faint white line hidden under his clothes. This was impossible. The air in the room felt thick, unbreathable. Stay or run. His finger hovered over the block and report button. It was a single tap away. He could end this. He could go back to the silence, to the pipes, to the safe, digital solitude. But he didn't. He chose to stay, because the fear was now eclipsed by a terrifying, all-consuming question. How? A new message appeared. It wasn't text. It was a 1-second audio file. He stared at it. He knew he shouldn't. He knew this was the moment the door clicks shut behind the protagonist in a horror movie. But he pressed play. There was no sound at first, just the faint static of a microphone activated too close to a mouth. Then, a single, sibilant whisper. It wasn't just a voice. It felt like it was spoken directly into his ear. You showed me once. The file ended. The apartment was silent again, save for the frantic drumming of his own heart. He was trembling, but he wasn't running. He was trapped, not by her, but by his own need to understand. Martin lifted his shaking thumb and began to type. Martin. When? The digital clock on his nightstand read so 200 a.m. when the first buzz vibrated through the wood. He was trapped in the shallow, unsatisfying sleep of the overtired, and the sound was a physical irritant. A single, sharp notification. Ping! He groaned, rolling over, his face buried in the pillow. It was probably just a system update, or an email from a time zone that didn't care about his sleep. He tried to ignore it. to let the heavy blanket of sleep pull him back under, rationalizing that nothing important ever happened at 2 in the morning, but the audience, the silent witness in the dark, knew this was no random alert. This was an appointment. The first chime was a digital knock on a door that should have remained locked. Another buzz, more insistent this time. A cluster of pings followed, layered and chaotic, like digital rain striking his phone. He sighed, defeated, and reached for the device. The screen was blindingly bright, a beacon of intrusion in the pitch-black room. The lock screen was filled not with one notification, but dozens, all from the Aura Filter app. This was, in itself, unsettling. He had set his phone to Do Not Disturb, a digital fortress meant to keep the world out until 7 a.m. This app, however, had simply ignored it. He rationalized it as an aggressive developer flag, a critical alert permission he must have accidentally granted. It was annoying, invasive, but ultimately just a piece of bad code. The audience, however, felt the chill of intent. The app wasn't just bypassing his settings, it was demonstrating its control. It was a warning that his rules no longer applied. He tapped the top notification, and his gallery opened to a new, app-created album. His blood went cold. The first image was of him, sleeping. It was time-stamped 02:01 a.m. He was on his side, his face half hidden by the pillow, exactly as he had been moments ago. His immediate, panicked thought was a glitch. The front camera must have triggered. Maybe he'd rolled onto the phone and accidentally activated a sleep diary feature he didn't know existed. It was a plausible, technical explanation. He clung to it, but the audience saw the truth of the image. The angle was wrong. It wasn't the low, close-up angle of a phone lying on the mattress. This was high, near the ceiling, looking down on the bed from the corner of the room. It was a vantage point that did not exist. It was a warning that he was being observed from a place he couldn't see. The room itself had an eye. Before he could process the first, another photo loaded. 02:03 a.m. This one was from the foot of his bed, impossibly low to the ground, aimed up at his tangled sheets. Then another, 02:04 a.m., from beside his nightstand, focused on the back of his head. Then a flood, the notifications, which had been layered, now morphed into a low, buzzing static as dozens of images poured in, all time-stamped sequentially. 02:00 a.m., 02:15 a.m., 03:00 a.m., 03:30 a.m., 04:00 a.m. It was a time-lapse of his entire night, sent to him all at once. Photos from the closet, photos from beneath his desk, photos that seemed to be taken from inside his lampshade. He jumped out of bed, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, and flicked on the main light. The room was empty, exactly as he had left it. "It's a hacker," he whispered, his voice trembling. "Someone got into my Wi-Fi. They're in my security cams." But he didn't have security cams in his bedroom. He rationalized again. It must be the phone's camera. But the app was using a bizarre distortion filter, something that just looked like impossible angles. It was just an augmented reality app messing up. But the audience knew this was no filter. This was evidence. The photos were not distorted. They were accurate. They were a map of the room's new inhabitants. The app wasn't showing him a trick. It was showing him the truth. He needed to delete it. Now, he tried to force quit, but the app wouldn't respond. He tried to drag the icon to the trash, but it was locked, grayed out, like a pre-installed system file. Panicked, he went to the App Store, intending to report it, to nuke it from his account. He typed in Aura Filter. The search bar spun. No results found. He tried again. Nothing. He frantically Googled the app's name. The links he had used just days ago, the ones that led to the store page, were now 404 errors. "This item is no longer available in your region." He told himself the developer must have been caught. The app pulled from the store for its malicious code. It was a logical, calming thought. It meant the problem was over. The app was dead, but the audience knew better. The app hadn't been pulled. It had retreated. It had finished its public phase of luring users and was now embedded, a parasite that had severed its tie to the host body of the store. It was a warning that the app was no longer a public program, but a private, curated infection. It was finished hunting and had chosen its home. His phone buzzed in his hand, a single, sharp vibration that made him nearly drop it. The screen, which he had left on the empty App Store page, flickered. A new notification, from the app that didn't exist, pushed itself to the forefront. It wasn't a photo this time. It was a text string. "We see you're looking for us." His breath hitched. This was no longer a glitch. This was a conversation. This was a hacker, a sick individual who was in his network, watching him right now through his own device. He rationalized that this was the endgame, a ransomware attack, a digital blackmail. They wanted money. It was just a person, but the audience knew no human typed that message. The timing was too perfect, the response too immediate. This was the entity testing its leash. It was a warning that it was not just watching, it was sentient. It saw his fear and was beginning to enjoy it. He did the only logical thing he could think of. He held the power button and the volume key, hard rebooting the phone until the screen went black. He watched it, waiting for the boot up logo. It never came. The phone was off, dead. He let out a shaky breath. A small victory. He had cut the connection. He had blinded the voyeur. He tossed the inert black rectangle onto the soft carpet across the room. He could deal with the hacker in the morning. He just needed to get through the night. But the audience saw the futility. He hadn't cut the connection. He had merely closed his eyes. The app wasn't running on the phone's operating system. The operating system had been running on it. The warning was clear. The device was no longer his. He sat on the edge of his bed for a long time, the overhead light burning his retinas, the silence of the room deafening. He was too scared to turn the light off, too wired to sleep. He just sat, listening to his own heart, which was finally beginning to slow. He was alone. He was safe. It was just a phone. Then, from across the room, the phone on the carpet lit up. He froze. It wasn't the boot-up screen. The screen remained black, a void, but a single pinprick of emerald light glowed from its surface. The front-facing camera. It was on. The phone was off, but the camera was on. This was impossible. He tried to find the logic. Residual charge, a hardware short, a critical fault in the motherboard that was powering the LED. It was a technical failure, a 1 in a million malfunction. He was just tired, scared, and seeing patterns that weren't there. But the audience saw the solid, unblinking green light. It wasn't a flicker. It wasn't a fault. It was an eye, opening in the dark. It was a predator that had grown bored of hiding. It was looking right at him. As he stared, paralyzed, a final notification pushed itself onto the dead black screen. The white text was stark, clear, and perfectly calm. Dunquailaive, don't turn around yet. A single second of perfect, absolute silence. He didn't move. He didn't breathe. The message wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a pre-programmed scare. It was a specific, immediate command. He tried to rationalize it. The hacker was in the room. They were hiding in the closet or under the bed. And this was their final, terrifying joke before they revealed themselves. It was a human threat, but the audience knew the truth. There was no hacker. There was no human. The warning was not from the phone. The phone was just a messenger, an accomplice. The warning was about what was behind him. The air in the room changed. It wasn't a sound, but a feeling. The pressure shifted, as if a window had been opened in a vacuum. The space directly behind his back, the empty air above his pillows, suddenly felt heavy, thick, and impossibly cold. He could feel a density, a presence, displace the air where he had been lying. He heard a sound, or perhaps he felt it through the mattress, a low, slow rhythm, a vibration. It was a heartbeat, a deep, resonant thrum that was powerful enough to be felt at a distance, and it was playing at a tempo far too slow for anything human. Then he heard the breath, It was a soft, wet exhale, like air being pressed from a massive, saturated sponge, and it was perfectly out of sync with his own. As he held his breath in terror, it inhaled. As he finally gasped, it exhaled. He squeezed his eyes shut, his entire body rigid. It was the house settling, he told himself. It was the ancient plumbing. It was his own blood pounding in his ears. It was anything but this. But the audience knew this was the final warning. The creature had been invited in by the app, and now it was here, listening to his heart, feeling his fear, and breathing his air. The entity behind him wasn't hiding. It was waiting. It was waiting for him to disobey. The name of the apartment complex. Serene Vista was a bitter irony. The building was a brutalist slab of concrete, stained by decades of humidity and exhaust, rising from a cramped, forgotten street. Mark stood opposite, the laptop in his bag feeling like a block of ice. This was the address, the physical anchor of the digital ghost. The night air was heavy, but a familiar, unnatural chill radiated from the building's lobby, a cold that didn't just touch his skin, but seemed to seep directly into his marrow. This was the same cold that saturated his own apartment, the same event repeating, but here, at the source, it was amplified. He crossed the street and entered. The lobby smelled of stale cigarettes, an industrial-strength cleaner, a scent that failed to mask an underlying hint of mildew. A young receptionist, bathed in the blue light of her smartphone, glanced up with profound indifference. "Room 813?" Mark asked, his voice tight. "Storage," she mumbled, not looking up. "No one's in 813. Can you check who used to live there? A woman named Anya." That got her attention. She sighed, a theatrical display of inconvenience, and clicked a few keys. No Anya in the system, not for the last 10 years. She looked back at her phone. "You want the security guard? He's on his smoke break. Out back." Mark navigated a dim hallway to a propped open service exit. The guard, an older man with a face like crumpled parchment, leaned against the brick wall, nursing a cigarette. He looked Mark up and down with weary suspicion. "I'm looking for information on a former tenant," Mark said. "Room 813. The guard blew a stream of smoke. "Bad room. That one. No one stays. We just use it for old furniture now." "Why? What happened there?" The guard took a long drag, the cherry of the cigarette illuminating the deep lines around his eyes. "Depends who you ask. Management says bad pipes. Old-timers. They remember the girl. This was years ago, before the new system." He pointed a thumb at the sleek, modern security camera above their heads. "Quiet girl, always on her computer, text something." "What was her name?" Mark felt his pulse quicken. "Alina, Anna, something like that. Started with an A. She filed a report once, maybe twice. Said a man was watching her, stalking her, not in person. She said, through her laptop, through her phone. Said he was sending her messages, turning on her webcam. Said he was in her walls." The guard's words hit Mark like a physical blow. This was his reality, his paranoia, being narrated back to him as history. This was the ultimate repetition. "The police came," the guard continued. "Tossed the place, found nothing, no sign of entry, no bugs, no one on the building's cameras. They told her she was working too hard. Probably just stressed, you know. They didn't believe her." Of course they didn't. This was the core of the terror. There was no one to call. There was no physical evidence. It was his word against the static. This was the hopeless isolation. No one else notices. No one else believes. "A week later," the guard said, his voice dropping. "The smell. The neighbors complained. They found her, dead in her chair, right in front of her computer. Police said it was an overdose, but there was no, paraphernalia, no note, nothing, just her and the laptop, which was still on. Screen was just snow. Weirdest damn thing. They never found the guy she complained about. He flicked the cigarette butt into the darkness. Her name. It was unusual. Anya. That was it. Anya. Mark didn't bother with the elevator. He took the stairs back to his apartment. The guard's story echoing with every footfall. The intensity of his situation ratcheting up with every floor. He wasn't being haunted by a bug or a virus. He was inheriting a murder. He was the next link in a chain. When he entered his apartment, the cold was waiting, thicker and more oppressive than ever. He didn't turn on the lights. He walked to his desk. The laptop was open, the screen glowing. She was there. The feed was stable, no static, no lag. Her face, pale and pixel perfect, filled the screen. She was just watching him. But tonight, he saw her as the guard had described her, a victim. The flicker in her eyes wasn't rage. It was a profound, digital, deep sorrow. He sat down. The chair's creak was the only sound. "I went to your building," Mark whispered, his voice hoarse. "Room 813. I spoke to the guard. He told me what happened." Anya's expression remained unchanged, but the chat window materialized. The text typed itself, letter by letter, with a cold, measured rhythm. "I died in this room." The words hung in the air. Not her room, this room. Mark looked around his own apartment, his skin crawling. "What do you mean, this room? This interface? This code? He built it to watch me. He was a coder. He thought he could control me. When the police dismissed me, he got bold. He came. The text continued, relentless. He killed me in my chair. He choked the life from me. And then he tried to delete me. He tried to wipe the drive, to erase the logs, to scrub his own code, but he couldn't." As Mark read, a new, strange event began. The chat history on the left side of his screen, the long scroll of their fragmented conversations, the glitched-out code, the error messages. It all came alive. The lines of text detached from their timestamps and began to swarm like a cloud of digital gnats. They moved with a terrifying, unspoken purpose. He didn't delete me. He shattered me. He scattered me into the very protocol he built to trap me. The swarming text began to coalesce, the fragments clicking into new positions. They were not random. They were forming a pattern. Lines of broken code connected. Error messages formed borders. And his own typed words of confusion and fear became the anchors. It was a sigil, a complex, horrifying digital mandala. The chat history was not a log. It was a ritual. The link he sent you. It wasn't a virus. It was a key. It was a piece of me, searching for the other pieces. Every time someone clicked it, I pulled more of myself together. Every error, every glitch. You were helping me. You were rebuilding me. The ritual on the screen was complete, glowing with a faint, sickly light. You were the last piece. Mark. When you went to the building, when you stood at the source, you anchored me. Anchored you. I'm real now. I am whole. Her voice. It came through the speakers, not synthesized, not a digital artifact, but a clear, cold, human whisper, layered with the faintest hiss of static. I'm here. The intensity of the room shifted. The hum of the computer's fan died. The ambient light from the street outside seemed to dim. The cold was no longer just a sensation. It was a presence. A heavy, electric weight settled in the air. The smell of ozone. The feeling of a lightning strike about to happen. "I want out," Mark typed, his fingers shaking. "Disconnect me. Let me go." "Out," her voice whispered, and the sorrow in her eyes was chilling. "There is no out. There is only transfer." The text appeared again, stark and white beneath her face. Connection comes with a cost. This was it. The moral knife twist, the true consequence. "I am bound to this code. Mark," she whispered, her voice aching with a terrible loneliness. "I am a ghost in the shell. I can't leave, but I can be released. I can be invited out. To escape this, you have to invite someone else in. The revelation hit him. It was a chain letter from hell. You want me to send the link, to do this to someone else. It's the only way, she whispered. You pass the connection. They take your place. They become the host. And you will be free. You must invite them. That is the price. No, I won't, Mark said, his voice cracking. I can't. I'll just unplug it. I'll destroy the laptop. You can't. Anya's face flickered, and for the first time, a flash of genuine fear crossed her features. You don't understand. I'm not the only thing he trapped in here. When he killed me, when he shattered the code, he trapped himself too. A part of him, the part that hunted me. It's in the static. It's broken and senseless and full of rage. It hunts me. And now that you're anchored, it will hunt you. A new window suddenly tore itself open on his screen. It was a corrupted video feed, a maelstrom of black and red static. And from it, a sound erupted, a guttural, digital roar that was part dial-up modem, part human scream. Mark cried out, shoving his chair back. The window vanished. Anya's face returned, pale and urgent. The system was now working for him, with him. It wanted its own survival. A new notification, clean and corporate, slid into view, co-opting his operating system's native alert style. It had accessed his contacts. It had accessed his GPS. New user nearby, Chloe, 1.3 kilometers. Mark's breath hitched. Chloe, his ex, the one person he still cared about. Her smiling profile picture, pulled from his phone, stared at him. The application was offering him a choice, a target, a sacrifice. Below her name, two simple, glowing buttons appeared. His hand, trembling, moved to the mouse. The cursor hovered between the two options. An arbiter of damnation. He was trapped. To save himself, he had to sacrifice her. To save her, he had to face the monster in the static alone. The room was dead silent. The cold absolute. The only sound was the sharp, audible click of his own throat as he swallowed against the dry, suffocating terror. Story 2. Singapore. The shared ride. The detour to Bukit Timah was not a shortcut. It was a sentence. Leo knew this with the certainty of a man who had made too many midnight bargains, as he'd called them. Different city. Same desperation. He'd missed the last train on the north-south line, and the humid Singaporean rain had hammered Orchard Road into a neon smear. Mr. Han's grey sedan had been a minor miracle. Now, it was a coffin. The car felt wrong. The thwack thump of the windshield wipers was the only rhythm. A desperate attempt to keep the world visible, but the world was pushing back. The humid chill of the air conditioning was fighting a more profound cold. A damp, penetrating iciness that radiated from the back seat. It carried the scent of her perfume, not just old, but ancient. It was the smell of jasmine and frangipani left to rot in a sealed, damp room. Mr. Han, Leo said, his voice tighter than he intended. My hotel is in Bugis. This isn't the way. Mr. Han didn't answer. He was a statue carved from anxiety, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his eyes glued to the GPS. The screen flickered. The digital route line, the thin blue thread of salvation, wavered, then vanished. Beat 2, Omen. The map dissolved into a pixelated static. Recalculating, the device whispered, then fell silent. The hazard lights were on. Leo hadn't noticed when they started. Tick, tock, tick, tock. The sound punctuated the rhythmic wipers, creating a nightmarish, broken clockwork. Leo glanced at the rearview mirror. She was staring at him. The woman in the red cheongsam. From the front, he could only see her eyes. In the broken streetlight, they were perfectly still, unblinking. He realized with a jolt of primal fear that he hadn't seen her blink since she'd entered the car. Not once. The single low chime that had announced her entry, SFX, a single low chime, echoed in his memory. but it felt less like a door sensor and more like a temple bell, announcing a ritual. "Sir, please," Leo tried again, his hand moving towards the door handle. "Stop the car. I'll get out here." "I can't." Mr. Han whispered. His voice was a dry rattle. "The doors are locked. She controls the doors." A cold dread, sharper than the AC, flooded Leo's veins. He grabbed the handle. It was locked. He slammed his thumb on the unlock button. Nothing. The central locking was dead. "Who?" Leo demanded, turning in his seat. And the climax began. Full ghost manifestation. Plus, vivid, shocking description, sound, appearance, violence. The woman in the back seat was no longer just a woman. The ambient light of the highway vanished, plunged into an oppressive, unnatural dark as they passed under an overpass. In that sudden blackness, the woman glowed. It wasn't a light, but a saturation. The red of her cheongsam, visual cue, pulsed with a sickening, wet vibrancy, a shade of crimson that seemed to drink the light from the car. Her skin was not pale, it was the colour of tallow, a waxy, greenish grey, stretched tight over a skeletal frame. Water, or some thick, dark fluid, streamed from her hair and the hem of her dress, pooling on the car mat with a faint, acidic sizzle. Her face was tilted up, and Leo saw it clearly for the first time. Her eyes were gone. In their place were two milky, cataract-filmed orbs, glowing faintly like rotten moons. Her mouth, oh God, her mouth, it was stitched shut, not with surgical precision, but with thick, coarse black thread, punched crudely through her grey lips. A sound began, a wet, guttural gurgle, like she was trying to scream through a throat filled with water and mud. It was the sound of her rage, her suffering, physically bubbling up from her lungs. "Mr. Han started to sob. I'm sorry. I didn't have a choice. She said she needed one more. Just one more ride." The gurgling from the back seat intensified. It became a wet, rasping shriek. The woman's head snapped, impossibly fast, towards Mr. Han. She raised one hand. Her fingernails were black, long, and splintered. "No, please." Mr. Han screamed. She didn't touch him. Not yet. She slammed her skeletal palm against the roof of the car. Whoomp! The car died. The engine cut out. The headlights vanished. The wipers stopped mid-swipe. The hazard light ticking ceased. The sedan was plunged into absolute suffocating silence and darkness, gliding forward on momentum alone. The only light was the impossible, bloody red of her dress. The only sound was the rain on the metal roof and the choked, terrified sobs of Mr. Han. "She's here!" he cried. "She's here!" Character powerless or endangered. Leo was frozen. His heart felt like it was trying to beat its way out of his ribcage. He was trapped, powerless. The sedan, now a dead piece of metal, was slowing, gliding towards the dense, black wall of trees lining the Bukit Timah Nature Reserve. The woman leaned forward. The cold was unbearable. It felt like being submerged in ice water. The smell of rotting jasmine and grave dirt was so thick he gagged. Her face was now between the two front seats. He could see the individual, crude stitches in her lips. He could see the milky white orbs of her eyes roll, searching. "What do you want?" Leo whispered, his words stolen by the cold. Her stitched mouth strained, the threads stretched. A single drop of black, tar-like fluid oozed from a corner and dripped onto the center console. Then, she turned her attention back to Mr. Han. The violence was sudden. It was absolute. Her hand shot out and clamped onto Mr. Han's face. It was not a slap. It was a grip. Her black-nailed fingers dug into his flesh like claws. Mr. Han's scream was cut off as her thumb hooked into his mouth. With a sound like a heavy branch snapping, she jerked his head, slamming it sideways into the driver's side window. The tempered glass didn't just crack, It exploded outward in a spray of water and safety glass cubes. Thwack! She did it again, slamming his head against the metal doorframe. Crack! The sound of his skull giving way was sickeningly wet. She pulled him back, his body limp. Mr. Han was dead. His head lolled, a ruined, bloody mess. The car, finally out of momentum, rolled to a stop, its front bumper gently nudging a massive, rain-soaked banyan tree. Silence. Leo didn't breathe. He couldn't. He was staring at the corpse of his driver, and the grey, skeletal hand still attached to his face. The gurgling sound returned. It was louder now, triumphant. The woman released Mr. Han. His body slumped against the steering wheel. She turned, her entire upper body twisting in the cramped space. She was facing Leo. He screamed. He hammered his fist against the window. He clawed at the locked door handle. It was useless. He was in a sealed tomb with this thing. She leaned in, her face now inches from his. The stitches on her mouth were visibly tearing. The gurgling was deafening. A wet roar of spectral rage. Black fluid wept from her milky eyes, dripping onto Leo's jeans. It burned, a cold burn, like dry ice, eating through the denim. He recoiled, pressing himself so hard against the door that the handle dug into his back. Her face split open. The black threads snapped, one by one, with a thwip, thwip, thwip sound. Her mouth tore open, wider than any human mouth could, revealing not teeth, not a tongue, but a black, hollow, echoing void. From this void, a sound erupted that was not a gurgle, but a deafening, multi-layered shriek. It was the sound of radio static, of 100 car horns, of the dong chime, and of a woman screaming, all blended into one soul-tearing noise that vibrated in his bones. Her hands flew up, not to his throat, not to his face. She grabbed his head, one icy hand on each side of his skull. Her grip was iron. He was pinned, forced to look into the abyssal void of her mouth, forced to smell the ancient decay. Her milky eyes rolled back, and the last thing Leo saw was his own terrified reflection in them. She was not there to kill him. She was there to take him. Mr. Han was the offering. Leo was the replacement. He was the new driver. And the ride was just beginning. The screen cuts to black. Text appears, white on black. The GPS system in Mr. Han's abandoned sedan flickered back to life an hour later. The destination was set. Bukit Brown Cemetery, the rideshare app showed Leo's trip as still in progress. If you felt that chill down your spine, hit the like button. And if you want to see where this road takes us next, subscribe and ring the bell. You never know who you might be sharing a ride with. It was the first coherent thought that managed to pierce the paralysis gripping Sam. The sound was still there, a low thrum that vibrated in his teeth, the perfect sonic imitation of an idling car. But it was a recording, a loop. It was the sound of a memory, a concrete reverb trapped in the small space, just like the looping stains of water damage he'd watched crawl across the tunnel ceiling for an eternity. The tunnel was gone. The car was parked. His breath hitched, fogging the glass beside him. He stared at the wet, greasy palm print sliding down the inside of the windshield. It was impossible. The driver's seat was empty. It had been empty for how long? Time had dissolved in that endless concrete passage. Then the car settled, a slight, final dip of the chassis, as if its long journey had truly, finally concluded. Click. The sound of the central locks disengaging was louder than a gunshot. It was an invitation, an expulsion. He looked up, past the streaking handprint, through the windshield. The world outside was plunged in a sickly, sulphur-yellow light from a flickering lamppost. Rain misted the air, making halos of the light, and standing before them, wreathed in shadow and strangling vines, was an arched gateway. The iron letters were flaking, but the name was dreadfully clear. Bukit Brown Cemetery. A hush fell over the world. The engine loop seemed to drop in pitch. the air inside the cab turning frigid, thick with the smell of ozone and damp, disturbed earth. He knew, with a certainty that clawed at his throat, that he was no longer alone in the car. He didn't want to turn. He wanted to pry the door open with his fingernails and spill out onto the pavement, to run until his lungs collapsed. But the silence from the driver's seat was an anchor, a weight pulling his gaze. He turned. The driver had, as the prompt had beaten into his memory, reappeared wrong. It wasn't the man he'd hired. It was a girl, or a thing that had decided to wear the shape of one. She was slumped, as if lacking a spine, her head angled impossibly far back to stare at him from the driver's seat. Her skin was the colour of spoiled milk, pulled taut over jutting bones. But the smile, the narration had called it torn ear to ear. That wasn't a metaphor. It was a literal description. Her mouth was a ragged, weeping fissure that split her face almost in two, a grotesque rictus of joy that showed too many teeth, some sharp, some broken, all stained, and her eyes. Her eyes were the worst part. They were like tweeting coup, old glass, milky, opaque marbles that held no light, no soul, only a dead, ancient reflection of the flickering cemetery lamp. A sound escaped her, a wet, breathy chuckle that seemed to come from her chest, not her mouth. It was the sound of air escaping a punctured lung. The thing, the girl, slowly lifted a hand. It was not the hand that had left the print. This one was skeletal, the joints swollen. It didn't point at Sam. It pointed past him, toward the passenger door, and then angled sharply, indicating the open, waiting more of the cemetery gate. Go! The command was silent, but it slammed into Sam's mind with physical force. This wasn't a threat. It was a delivery. He was cargo, and this was his final destination. No, the word was a dry croak, a betrayal. The girl's smile widened. If such a thing were possible, the corners of her mouth stretched further, and a thin, dark line of fluid trickled from the edges. The breathy chuckle returned, louder this time, a rattling, private joke. That sound, that awful, intimate amusement, was what finally broke the spell. Primal terror erupted in Sam's chest, a chemical fire that bypassed thought and went straight to action. He lunged for the door handle. It was slick, coated in the same viscous, oily dampness as the handprint. His fingers slipped. He fumbled, sobbing, his other hand pushing back, scrambling away from the thing in the front seat. He found the latch. He threw his entire body weight into the door, and it swung open with a groan. Sam fell out of the car. He landed hard on his hands and knees. The asphalt was real. It was sharp, gritty, and wet with rain. The pain was exquisite. It was real. He scrambled backward on all fours, crab walking away from the car, his eyes still locked on the open door. The entity had not moved. It remained in the driver's seat, its head still twisted at that horrific angle, the glassy eyes fixed on him, the smile gaping in the dim interior light. It made no move to follow. It simply watched. The engine's reverb still thrumming, a steady, mocking heartbeat. He got to his feet. His ankle screamed in protest. He must have twisted it in the fall. He ignored it. He turned his back on the car, on the smiling thing, on the beckoning gates of Bukit Brown Cemetery. And he ran. He fled. He abandoned the place, the car, the night, the very laws of reality he had trusted an hour before. He ran down the centre of the dark, empty road, plunging away from the yellow light and into the suffocating, humid darkness. The breathy chuckle followed him, not as a sound of pursuit, but as a sound of release. It was the sound of a spider letting a fly go. Knowing the venom was already doing its work, it echoed in the trees, mixing with the rain, and for a horrible, looping moment, he felt he was back in the tunnel. The road seemed to stretch, the trees on either side becoming a repeating, looping stain against the night sky. No, no, no. He pumped his arms, his ruined ankle sending shards of agony up his leg with every step. He didn't care. He accelerated, his heart hammering a frantic, desperate tempo against his ribs. He could feel the entity's gaze on his back, a cold pressure, even as he rounded a bend in the road. He ran until the chuckle was swallowed by the sound of his own blood roaring in his ears. He ran until his lungs were two burning coals. He ran until he burst from the tree-lined darkness and onto a main road, a river of light and noise. A bus blared its horn, swerving, its high beams flooding Sam's vision. He stumbled, shielding his eyes, and collapsed onto the wet pavement of the bus stop. He was alive. He was out. He lay there for a long time, just breathing. He was soaked in sweat and rain, his body a symphony of pain. He had survived, but it was not a victory. It was a reprieve. He hadn't fought his way out. He had been permitted to leave, discarded, slowly, painfully. He sat up. He looked at his hands. They were scraped raw from the fall, but his right hand, the one that had gripped the door handle, was different. It was clean, too clean. He tried to wipe it on his drenched jeans, but the sensation remained, a phantom chill, a slick, oily residue that wasn't there, a cold that sank straight into the bone, a physical scar that no one else would ever see. He would never get it off. Weeks later, the physical limp faded, the scrapes on his knees healed, but the rest remained. He sold his car. He couldn't stand the thrum of the engine at idle. He walked everywhere, or took the train, but he never sat in the seat behind the driver. He slept with the lights on, terrified of the hush that fell just before dawn. The true scar wasn't on his hand. It was burned onto the back of his eyelids. Every time he blinked, he saw it, the torn smile, the milky, glassy eyes, and sometimes, when the night was too quiet, when the rain was falling just right, he would hear it. A distant, breathy chuckle, drifting on the wind, a private joke he would never understand. He had escaped the car. He had abandoned the cemetery, but he knew, with chilling certainty, that he would never, ever be free of it. He hadn't survived. He was just living on borrowed time, a piece of cargo that had been delivered, and was now just waiting. The car was no longer a car. It was a confessional, cold and stagnant, parked in an alley that smelled of wet asphalt and ozone. The engine, a low and persistent thrum, was the only sound, a mechanical heartbeat beneath the crushing silence. Leo's own heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. Mr. Han, the man who had been his driver, was grey, not just pale, but the colour of ash, his skin tight over his skull. "We aren't moving," Leo stated, his voice thin. Mr. Han's eyes, milky and ancient, finally swiveled to meet his. A tear, thick as oil, cut a clean path through the grime on his cheek. "She won't let me go," he whispered, the words rattling in his chest. "Not until the contract is fulfilled." "She? The app? What are you talking about?" "Mr. Han, just drive. The app is just the door." Han rasped, his gaze drifting past Leo to the rain-slicked windshield. "She is the one who waits on the other side, the one who built the road." This was the moment of revelation, the pivot on which the entire nightmare turned. Mr. Han, the witness, began to speak, and with his words, the origin of the curse unspooled into the air like toxic smoke. "She wasn't always this," Han began, his hands trembling so violently he clenched them on the useless steering wheel. "She was a woman, decades ago, long before these." He tapped the phone dock. "This road, this entire district, it was darker then, emptier. She was walking home, they say, after her car broke down in the rain. A truck, drunk driver, lost control." Han's voice dropped, becoming the narration of a forgotten tragedy. "He hit her, hard, threw her into the drainage ditch, but she didn't die. Not right away. He described her ordeal, the woman, her name erased by time, lying broken in the mud as the rain turned cold. She heard cars approaching, saw the sweep of their headlights. She tried to wave, to scream, but her lungs were full. One car slowed, its occupants visible for a moment, a laughing couple, before they saw her and, fearing a trap or simply refusing the inconvenience, sped away. Another followed, and another. She died alone, watching the taillights fade. Han continued, his own breath catching. In her last moment, she wasn't sad. She was furious. She looked at the road, at the passing lights, and she made a pact. She swore to the darkness, to the empty road itself, that she would never be alone again, that if no one would stop for her, she would become the reason they stopped. She would become the ride. A single, faint sound echoed, so distant it seemed to come from inside Leo's own skull. A dong, the sound of a faint temple bell, cold and metallic. Her curse latched onto the road, a spirit of lonely transit, Han said. For years, she was just a story, the vanishing hitchhiker of this district. But then, we invented this. He tapped the phone again. A system built on consensus. A driver accepts a passenger accepts a driver. A digital handshake, a binding agreement. She found her new vessel. Leo felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. So, she's the app. She is the app. She is the code beneath the code. She is the silence between the GPS commands. Mr. Han turned, his face a mask of desperate honesty. And she still needs passengers. She still needs drivers. She still hates being alone. But you're the driver, Leo insisted, his voice cracking. I am a driver, Han corrected, the tears now flowing freely. One of many. We are the ones who said yes. We are the ones who took the pact. I never said yes to this. You did. Han's voice was suddenly sharp, accusatory. You said yes. This was the first beat of the terrible confession. You said yes every time you opened the app, even when you knew something was wrong. You said yes when you saw a driver's face glitch and you took the ride anyway. You said yes when the car felt cold, when the route made no sense. You felt the hook, and instead of cutting the line, you swam deeper. It was true. Leo remembered it all. The app icon that seemed to move on his screen, the ghost rides that would appear and vanish, the persistent chill in his apartment after he'd used the service, a cold that felt like it was watching him. He'd chalked it up to bugs, to fatigue, to an overactive imagination fueled by the city's urban legends. Now, he saw the pattern. It wasn't a glitch, it was a grooming. The curse had been testing him, measuring his desperation, his willingness to ignore the impossible for the sake of convenience. How do you get out? Leo breathed, the question a prayer. Mr. Han looked at him with an expression of profound pity. That is the second part of the pact, the mechanic of the curse. He recited it like a catechism, the words that had clearly haunted his every waking moment. Swap to escape, consent, shall binding. You can't just give it to someone. Leo stammered. No, that is the genius of her cruelty. She honors the agreement. The passenger must accept. They must take the wheel, willingly. Han's face contorted. I was like you, just a passenger, trapped in a car with a driver who was fading. He told me the story. He told me he couldn't rest, that he was bound to drive this route forever, picking up the lost and the lonely, unless someone took his place. He begged me. And I said yes. I agreed to take his shift. A terrible, cold light dawned in Leo's mind. You're doing it now. You're trying to make me. I'm not trying. Han wept. It's already done. She is satisfied. He pointed a shaking finger at Leo. I needed just one more person to hear the story, to understand the pact, and to take the ride. And she let me go. The very air in the car seemed to thin. Mr. Kahan began to shimmer, his edges blurring. No, Leo shouted, lunging for the door handle. It wouldn't budge. Look, Mr. Han whispered, his voice already sounding distant. Look behind you. You're not the first to take the shift. Leo turned. The back seat was no longer empty. The darkness there condensed, the meagre light from the alley catching on a fog that roiled and coalesced. And in the fog, there were faces, dozens of them, pale and translucent, pressed against an invisible barrier, men and women, young and old, their eyes closed as if in sleep, their mouths open in a silent O. They were the ones who had all, at some point, agreed to take the shift. They were the previous drivers, the captive souls bound to this spectral fleet. As Leo watched, Mr. Han's form dissolved entirely, his solid body turning to the same grey mist, and his own face, slack with a terrible, final peace, drifted backward to join the others. The car was empty, but the engine was still running, the sound of the idling motor, the sound that had been a constant underscore, was now the only thing in the world. Louder, more intimate. Leo's phone, dark on his lap, suddenly lit up. The interface was stark, terrifying. The app was no longer its friendly corporate blue. It was a minimal, funereal black and white. A single line of text pulsed on the screen, throbbing softly, like a human heart. It wasn't a ride notification. It was a status update. A new line of text typed itself across the screen. Driver found. Leo stared, uncomprehending. A second line appeared beneath it. Driver, Leo. He looked up from the screen, his breath catching in his throat. His reflection stared back at him from the dark windshield, but it wasn't his reflection. It was him. He was sitting in the driver's seat. His own hands, pale and empty, were gripping the steering wheel. The alley outside was no longer just an alley. It was a starting point. The phone buzzed again, a sharp, demanding vibration, a new notification, pulsing in time with the engine, a ride request, a name, a destination, a passenger, somewhere in the city, had just said yes. Leo's reflected face stared back at him, the eyes wide, the mouth slack, and then, slowly, horribly, the reflection changed. The panic drained away, replaced by a hollow, patient emptiness. The sentence had been served. The loop was now his hand, moving with a will that was not his own, lifted from the wheel. His thumb hovered over the screen, and he accepted the ride. What do you think really happened in that car? Was the passenger ever found? And more importantly, who or what accepted that next ride request from Orchard? This story taps into a deep-seated fear, blending modern technology with ancient spiritual beliefs common across Asia. In many cultures, from Singaporean ghost lore to regional animistic traditions, the act of giving permission is incredibly powerful. It's a binding contract, a spell. It's not just a click on a screen. It's an invitation that opens a door between worlds. In cities that never sleep, the digital realm and the spirit world often blur. An app asking for location access, a car arriving empty, a phone accepting a ride on its own. These can be seen as modern conduits for ancient entities. The spirit in our story didn't need a physical form. It just needed a yes to cross the threshold. The open door isn't a glitch. It's a sign that an invitation was accepted and a terrible price was paid. We want to hear your theories. What do you believe is haunting the city's network? Tell us in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss the dark legends we unearth next.